The morning fog rolled across Naval Base Coronado as Petty Officer Second Class Maria Santos adjusted her body armor and checked her weapon for the third time. At 24, she had been in the Navy for 6 years, working her way up from the lowest ranks through sheer determination and an unwavering attention to detail. Today, like many days before, she drew guard duty at the ammunition storage facility, an assignment most sailors considered boring and uneventful. The ammo facility sat on the far edge of the base, surrounded by high fences topped with razor wire and warning signs that left no doubt about the serious nature of what lay beyond. Inside the compound, concrete bunkers held everything from small arms ammunition to explosive ordnance that could level city blocks. It was the kind of place where one mistake could end careers or worse. Maria had volunteered for extra guard shifts whenever possible. While other sailors complained about the long hours standing in the California sun or the overnight watches that stretched endlessly through the dark hours, she saw each assignment as an opportunity to prove herself. In a Navy still dominated by men, especially in combat-related roles, she knew that excellence was not optional. It was the minimum requirement for respect. She walked the perimeter fence, her boots making steady rhythm against the gravel path. The morning briefing had been routine. No special visitors expected, no unusual activities planned. Just another standard day of protecting millions of dollars worth of military explosives from anyone foolish enough to try something stupid. The guard shack radio crackled to life as she completed her first circuit. "Santos, this is base operations. Be advised we have a vehicle approaching your location. Standard inspection protocols apply." Maria keyed her radio. "Copy, base ops. Standing by for a vehicle inspection." She positioned herself at the main gate, checking that her sidearm was secure and her radio was functioning properly. Vehicle inspections were routine, but she treated each one with the same level of seriousness. Too many guards had gotten complacent over the years, and complacency in a place like this could have devastating consequences. A black SUV with tinted windows approached the checkpoint. Maria held up her hand and stepped forward, following the protocol she had memorized and practiced countless times. The vehicle came to a complete stop at the designated line painted across the road. "Good morning," she called out as the driver's window lowered. "I need to see identification for all occupants and documentation for your visit." The driver, a Navy lieutenant she didn't recognize, handed over his military ID and a set of orders. Maria examined the documents carefully, checking the photo against the face, verifying the dates and signatures, ensuring every detail was correct. She had been trained to be thorough, and thoroughness had become second nature. "Sir, what is the purpose of your visit to the ammunition facility today?" she asked, maintaining proper military bearing while keeping her voice professional but firm. "We have a scheduled inspection of the ordnance storage areas," the lieutenant replied. "Everything should be in your daily briefing notes." Maria frowned slightly. She had reviewed the briefing notes 3 times that morning, and there had been no mention of any scheduled inspections. She walked back to the guard shack and pulled out the clipboard containing the day's activities and authorized personnel list. No inspection was listed. No additional personnel were expected beyond the normal shift changes and routine maintenance that occurred every Tuesday. Something was not right, and Maria's instincts, sharpened by years of military training and countless hours of guard duty, began sending up warning signals. She returned to the vehicle and leaned down to speak with the driver again. "Sir, I'm not showing any scheduled inspections on today's activity log. I'm going to need to verify this with base operations before I can allow access to the facility." The lieutenant's expression hardened slightly. "Petty officer, I don't have time for delays. This is an urgent inspection ordered by the base commander. You need to open that gate now." Maria felt the familiar knot of pressure that came when authority figures try to push past proper procedures. She had faced this situation before. Officers who thought their rank alone should be enough to bypass security protocols. But she had learned early in her career that the rules existed for good reasons, and those reasons didn't change just because someone wore more stripes or gold bars. I understand your urgency, sir, but I have explicit orders to verify all unscheduled visits with base operations before granting access. It will only take a few minutes to confirm your inspection orders. She walked back to the guard shack and picked up the secure phone line that connected directly to the base operations center. As she dialed the number, she kept one eye on the SUV and noticed that the passenger in the back seat was speaking quietly into his cell phone. The windows were too tinted to see clearly, but something about the body language suggested tension. Base ops, this is Santos at the ammo facility. I have a vehicle here claiming to have inspection orders that aren't in my briefing notes. Can you confirm any scheduled inspections for today? The voice on the other end was crisp and immediate. Negative, Santos. No inspections are scheduled for your facility today. What type of vehicle and how many occupants? Black SUV. Appears to be 3 occupants. Driver presented lieutenant's credentials. Claims urgent inspection ordered by base commander. There was a pause on the line. Santos, maintain your position and do not allow access. We're sending additional security to your location immediately. Continue to follow all protocols. Maria's heart rate increased, but her voice remained steady. Copied, base ops. We'll maintain position and follow protocols. As she hung up the phone, she saw the lieutenant getting out of the vehicle and walking toward the guard shack. His demeanor had changed from impatient to aggressive, and Maria's training kicked into high gear. She stepped outside to meet him, keeping the counter between them and ensuring she had clear lines of sight to both the vehicle and the approach road. Petty Officer Santos, the lieutenant said, reading her name tape, I'm ordering you to open that gate. This is a matter of national security, and your delays are compromising an important mission. Maria stood straighter, her hand resting casually near her sidearm. Sir, I confirmed with base operations that no inspections are scheduled today. I've been ordered to maintain my position and follow all security protocols. I cannot grant access without proper authorization. The lieutenant took another step closer, and Maria noticed that his uniform, while correct in most details, had subtle inconsistencies that her trained eye began to catalog. The ribbons were in the wrong order for someone with his stated years of service. The boots were not regulation Navy issue. Small details that most people would miss, but details that suggested this man might not be who he claimed to be. Behind him, she saw the rear passenger door of the SUV open slightly, and her situational awareness heightened to maximum alert. Whatever was happening here, it was not a routine inspection by legitimate Navy personnel. She keyed her radio while maintaining eye contact with the lieutenant. Base ops, this is Santos. Request immediate backup at ammunition facility main gate. Possible security breach in progress. The lieutenant's hand moved toward his waistband, and Maria's training took over completely. Years of practice and preparation compressed into a single moment of crystal-clear focus. She drew her sidearm with smooth, practiced efficiency and took a proper shooting stance. Sir, stop right there and keep your hands where I can see them, she commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had trained for this exact situation. Do not reach for anything. Place your hands on top of your head immediately. The morning had gone from routine to potentially deadly in a matter of minutes, and Petty Officer Second Class Maria Santos found herself standing between unknown threats and one of the most dangerous ammunition storage facilities on the West Coast. Everything she had trained for, every hour of guard duty, every protocol she had memorized had led to this moment. In the distance, she could hear the sound of approaching sirens, but help was still minutes away. For now, she stood alone between potential terrorists and enough explosives to devastate the entire base. Her finger remained alongside the trigger guard, ready but disciplined exactly as she had been trained. The lieutenant had frozen at her command, his hands slowly moving toward his head, but his eyes remained focused on her with an intensity that confirmed her worst suspicions. These were not legitimate Navy personnel, and whatever they wanted with the ammunition facility, she was the only thing standing in their way. Maria Santos had drawn what she thought would be another boring day of guard duty. Instead, She found herself facing the most important test of her military career, with the safety of thousands of people potentially hanging in the balance. The standoff lasted exactly 93 seconds, though it felt like hours to Maria. The fake lieutenant kept his hands raised, but continued to stare at her with cold calculation, as if measuring her resolve and looking for weaknesses. Behind him, she could see movement in the SUV as the other occupants seemed to be having an urgent discussion. The sound of approaching vehicles grew louder, and Maria felt a surge of relief when she saw the first military police vehicle round the corner at high speed, followed by two more. Within moments, the area around the ammunition facility gate was swarming with armed security personnel, all taking defensive positions behind their vehicles and establishing a proper perimeter. Master Sergeant Rodriguez, the base security chief, approached with his weapon drawn but lowered. "Santos, report," he commanded tersely. 3 individuals in black SUV attempted to gain access using false inspection orders, Maria reported, maintaining her weapon stance while speaking. Documents not verified in daily briefings. Base ops confirmed no inspection scheduled. Subject presented credentials that appear fraudulent upon closer inspection. Rodriguez nodded and signaled to his team. Within minutes, all 3 occupants of the SUV were in custody. Their vehicle was being searched, and the immediate threat was neutralized. Maria finally lowered her weapon, her hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. "Outstanding work, Santos," Rodriguez said as he holstered his sidearm. "Your attention to detail and adherence to protocols potentially prevented a serious security breach." As the investigation unfolded over the following hours, the scope of what Maria had prevented became clear. The 3 men were not Navy personnel at all, but members of a domestic terrorist group that had been planning to steal military explosives for an attack on a federal building in Los Angeles. Their plan had been months in the making, with careful observation of the base's routines and procedures. They had counted on the guard at the ammunition facility being either careless or intimidated by apparent authority. They had not counted on Maria Santos. The fake lieutenant, whose real name was Thomas Mitchell, had been dishonorably discharged from the Army 3 years earlier and had since become radicalized by extremist online groups. The other 2 were his civilian accomplices, including an expert in explosives who had planned to use the stolen military ordnance to create a devastating truck bomb. During her debriefing with Navy Criminal Investigative Service agents, Maria learned that her quick thinking and strict adherence to protocols had not only prevented the theft of dangerous materials, but had also led to the arrest of individuals who had been on federal watch lists for months. Most guards would have been intimidated by the uniform and the aggressive approach, Special Agent Patricia Chin explained. "Your training and instincts saved lives today, Petty Officer Santos." The story spread quickly through the base, as stories like this always do in military communities. Within hours, everyone from the newest recruits to the most senior officers knew about the petite second-class petty officer who had faced down potential terrorists at the ammo dump. But Maria found the attention uncomfortable. She had simply done her job, followed her training, and trusted her instincts. To her, it was not heroic, it was professional responsibility. She returned to her regular duties, continuing to volunteer for guard shifts and maintaining the same level of attention to detail that had served her so well. 3 days after the incident, Maria was conducting her morning inspection of the perimeter fence when she noticed something unusual. A lone figure was walking along the outer fence line, moving with the purposeful stride of someone conducting their own security assessment. The person was wearing Navy utilities, but no visible rank insignia from her distance. She changed direction to intercept the individual, following the same protocols that had served her well during the terrorist incident. As she approached, she could see that it was a senior officer. The gold oak leaf on his collar identified him as a Navy commander, but she did not recognize him from any of the base personnel she knew. "Excuse me, sir," she called out when she was within proper speaking distance. "This is a restricted area. May I see your identification and your authorization to be in this location?" The commander turned toward her, and Maria immediately noticed something different about him. His bearing was unmistakably military, but there was an intensity in his eyes that suggested combat experience far beyond what most Navy officers possessed. His uniform was perfectly pressed, but his boots showed the kind of wear that came from serious field time. "I'm Commander James Sullivan," he said, reaching slowly for his identification while maintaining eye contact with Maria. "I'm here conducting a security assessment following the incident that occurred earlier this week." Maria examined his credentials carefully, noting that his identification indicated he was assigned to Naval Special Warfare Command, the administrative headquarters for the Navy SEALs. The documentation appeared legitimate, but after the recent incident, she was taking no chances with anyone claiming official business. "Sir, I need to verify your authorization with base operations before I can permit access to this restricted area," she said, maintaining the same professional tone she had used with the fake lieutenant. Commander Sullivan nodded approvingly. "That's exactly what you should do, Petty Officer Santos. Take all the time you need." The fact that he knew her name was not surprising. Her recent actions had made her somewhat famous on base, but something about the way he said it suggested he knew more about her than just the terrorist incident. She walked to the nearest communication point and called base operations for verification. The response was immediate and clear. Commander Sullivan was indeed authorized to conduct security assessments throughout the base, and his presence at the ammunition facility had been expected. When she returned to where the commander was waiting, she found him examining the fence line with the attention to detail of someone who understood security from both defensive and offensive perspectives. "Your verification checks out, sir," she reported. "Is there anything you need assistance with during your assessment?" Commander Sullivan straightened and looked directly at her. "Actually, Petty Officer Santos, I came here specifically to meet you. Your actions 3 days ago have attracted attention at levels much higher than this base." Maria felt a familiar knot in her stomach. In her experience, attention from higher levels usually meant complications, and she preferred the straightforward world of following orders and doing her job well. "I was just doing my duty, sir," she replied. "Following the protocols I was trained to follow." "Yes, you were," Sullivan agreed. "But the way you handled that situation, your attention to detail, your adherence to procedures under pressure, your tactical awareness, those qualities are exactly what we look for in special operations personnel." Maria's eyes widened slightly. Special operations was a world she had heard about, but never seriously considered. It was a realm dominated by elite male warriors who seemed to exist in a different universe from regular Navy personnel like herself. Commander Sullivan continued, "I've reviewed your entire service record, Santos. 6 years of exemplary performance, consistently top scores in weapons qualification, advanced training in security procedures, and now a demonstrated ability to make split-second decisions under extreme pressure. You have exactly the profile we need for a special assignment." "What kind of special assignment, sir?" Maria asked, though part of her was afraid to hear the answer. "There's a facility in the mountains of Afghanistan that needs someone with your particular skills," Sullivan explained. "It's a forward operating base that serves as a supply depot for special operations teams. The security requirements are similar to what you've been doing here, but the stakes are considerably higher, and the threats are more sophisticated than domestic terrorists with fake uniforms." Maria felt her world shifting beneath her feet. Afghanistan was where the real war was being fought, where Navy SEALs and other special operations forces were conducting the most dangerous missions against the most dangerous enemies. It was a place where careers were made or ended, where heroes were forged or broken. "Why me, sir?" she asked. "There must be hundreds of personnel with more experience, more training, higher security clearances." Commander Sullivan smiled, the first time she had seen any change in his serious expression. "Because 3 days ago, you proved that experience and training are worthless without judgment and courage. You didn't hesitate to challenge authority when something didn't feel right. You followed procedures even when pressured to ignore them. And when a situation turned dangerous, You responded with exactly the right level of force at exactly the right time. He paused, studying her face for her reaction. Those qualities can't be taught, Santos. They're either part of who you are, or they're not. You've proven they're part of who you are. Maria stood quietly for a moment, processing what she was hearing. 3 days ago, she had been a regular petty officer pulling guard duty and looking forward to her next leave. Now a SEAL commander was offering her an assignment that would take her into the heart of the war zone. "How long would this assignment be, sir?" she asked. 6 months initially, with the possibility of extension depending on operational needs and your performance, Sullivan replied. "I won't lie to you, Santos. It's dangerous work in a dangerous place. But it's also the kind of assignment that can define a military career." Maria thought about her current life, the routine guard duties, the predictable schedule, the safety of a stateside assignment. Then she thought about the look in the fake lieutenant's eyes when he had reached for his weapon, and the knowledge that she had been the only thing standing between terrorists and enough explosives to kill thousands of people. "When would I need to give you an answer, sir?" she asked. "I'll be on base for the rest of the week conducting assessments and interviews," Sullivan said. "Take some time to think about it. Talk to people you trust. This isn't a decision to make lightly." As he prepared to leave, he turned back to her. "One more thing, Santos. What you did 3 days ago, that was just the beginning. If you accept this assignment, you'll be working alongside some of the most elite warriors in the military. They'll test you in ways you can't imagine. But if you prove yourself, you'll become part of something special." Commander Sullivan walked away, leaving Maria alone with the biggest decision of her military career. The morning fog was beginning to lift, revealing the mountains that surrounded Naval Base Coronado. Somewhere beyond those mountains, in places she had only seen on maps, a war was being fought by warriors whose names would never be known by the public they protected. For the first time in her life, Maria Santos was being invited to join them. Maria spent the next 2 days in a state of constant internal debate. During her guard shifts, she found herself studying every detail of the ammunition facility with new eyes, imagining how different it would be to protect a similar facility in a war zone where the threats were not domestic terrorists in fake uniforms, but trained enemy fighters with military equipment and sophisticated tactics. She called her older brother Carlos, a Marine veteran who had served 2 tours in Iraq before returning home to start a construction business in their hometown of Phoenix. Carlos had always been her closest confidant and the one person whose military judgment she trusted completely. "A SEAL commander personally came to recruit you?" Carlos asked, his voice carrying a mixture of pride and concern. "Maria, do you understand how rare that is? They don't just hand out invitations to work with special operations teams." "I know it's a big opportunity," Maria replied, "but I also know it's dangerous. And I'm not sure I'm ready for that level of responsibility." Carlos was quiet for a moment before responding. "You remember when you were 16 and that drunk driver ran the red light downtown? You were the only witness, and you testified in court even though his family was threatening you." Maria remembered. It had been a case where a young father had been killed, and the drunk driver's family had tried to intimidate witnesses to keep him from going to prison. She had been scared but had testified anyway because it was the right thing to do. "You've always had courage, little sister," Carlos continued. "The question isn't whether you're brave enough. The question is whether you're ready to find out what you're really capable of." That night, Maria researched everything she could find about Forward Operating Base Chapman in Afghanistan's Paktia province. It was a remote outpost in the mountains near the Pakistan border, serving as a supply and staging area for special operations teams conducting raids against Taliban and al-Qaeda leadership. The base had been attacked multiple times, and security was provided by a small team of specially selected personnel who had to be able to function as both guards and fighters. The more she read, the more she realized that Commander Sullivan had been understating the challenges. This was not just a guard position. It was a combat role that required split-second decisions under fire, the ability to coordinate with elite special operations teams, and the mental toughness to function in an environment where mistakes could cost American lives. On the third day after her meeting with Commander Sullivan, Maria made her decision. She found him in the Base Operations Center, studying satellite imagery and tactical maps with several other senior officers. "Sir, could I speak with you privately?" she asked, maintaining proper military bearing despite the nervousness she felt. Commander Sullivan looked up from the maps and nodded. "Of course, Santos. Let's step outside." They walked to a quiet area behind the operations building, where the sounds of base activities provided enough background noise to ensure privacy. Maria took a deep breath and looked directly into Sullivan's eyes. "Sir, I accept the assignment," she said. "When do I leave?" Sullivan studied her face for a moment, as if searching for any signs of doubt or hesitation. "Are you certain about this decision, Santos? Once we begin the process, there won't be an easy way to change your mind." "I'm certain, sir. This is what I want to do." Sullivan nodded with satisfaction. "Good. Report to Building 147 at 0800 tomorrow morning. You'll begin a 3-week intensive training program that will prepare you for what you'll face in Afghanistan. The training will be unlike anything you've experienced in the regular Navy." Over the following weeks, Maria discovered that Sullivan had not been exaggerating. The training was conducted by instructors from various special operations units, including Navy SEALs, Army Green Berets, and Air Force Pararescue Specialists. Every day brought new challenges that pushed her physical and mental limits. She learned advanced marksmanship techniques that went far beyond basic military shooting skills. She practiced urban warfare tactics in mock cities built for training. She studied intelligence analysis, learning to identify threats from fragments of information that seemed unrelated to untrained eyes. The other trainees in her program were all experienced military personnel who had been selected for similar special assignments. There was Master Sergeant Williams, an Army Ranger who had already completed 2 combat tours. Petty Officer First Class Jackson, a Navy explosive ordnance disposal specialist with extensive experience in bomb defusal. Staff Sergeant Martinez, an Air Force security specialist who had protected air bases in Iraq. Maria was the most junior person in the group by rank and experience, and initially some of the others questioned whether she belonged there. That changed during the 3rd week of training, when they conducted a realistic scenario designed to test their ability to defend a forward operating base under attack. The exercise began at 0300 hours with simulated enemy forces attempting to breach the perimeter while rocket attacks targeted the ammunition storage areas. Maria found herself in command of one section of the defensive perimeter when the exercise leader was killed by simulated enemy fire. Without hesitation, she took charge of the remaining defenders, coordinating their fields of fire and calling in simulated air support while maintaining communication with the base command center. Her actions during the 4-hour exercise earned praise from the instructors and respect from her fellow trainees. "You think like a warrior, not just a guard," Master Sergeant Williams told her after the exercise. "That's the difference between surviving over there and coming home in a box." The final week of training focused on the specific challenges she would face at Forward Operating Base Chapman. She studied the terrain, the local tribal politics, the enemy tactics that had been used in previous attacks. She learned to recognize the signs of incoming rocket attacks and the proper procedures for coordinating with special operations teams who might arrive at any hour with wounded teammates or urgent supply needs. Commander Sullivan appeared for her final evaluation, conducting a 2-hour interview that covered everything from tactical scenarios to personal motivation. At the end of the session, he stood and extended his hand. "Congratulations, Petty Officer Santos. You've earned your place on the team. Your flight to Afghanistan leaves in 72 hours. The next 3 days passed in a blur of final preparations. She updated her will, arranged for her personal belongings to be stored, and said goodbye to friends who would not see her for at least 6 months. The hardest conversation was with her parents, who were proud but terrified about their daughter deploying to one of the most dangerous places on Earth. Her father, a retired construction foreman who had always been her role model for quiet strength and integrity, pulled her aside on her final evening home. "Mija, I've always been proud of you," he said, using the Spanish endearment he had called her since childhood. "But I want you to promise me something. Over there, in that place, remember that your job is to come home alive. Everything else is secondary to that." Maria hugged her father tightly, knowing that it might be months before she saw him again. "I promise, Papa. I'll be careful." The flight to Afghanistan involved multiple stops and took nearly 36 hours. Maria traveled in her utilities, carrying only essential gear and personal items that would fit in a single duffel bag. The other passengers included soldiers, Marines, airmen, and contractors heading to various bases throughout the country. As the transport aircraft descended toward Bagram Air Base, Maria looked out the window at the harsh mountain landscape below. Somewhere in those mountains, forward operating base Chapman waited for her, along with challenges that would test everything she had learned during her military career. She thought about the morning 3 weeks ago when she had been conducting routine guard duty at the ammunition facility in San Diego. That seemed like a lifetime ago, though it had been less than a month. Everything had changed because she had been willing to challenge authority and follow her instincts when something didn't feel right. Now she was about to find out whether those same instincts would serve her in a place where the stakes were measured in American lives rather than stolen explosives. The aircraft touched down on the runway at Bagram with a solid thump, officially beginning the next chapter of her military career. Petty Officer Second Class Maria Santos had accepted the invitation to join the most elite levels of the American military. In a few hours, she would begin the most important and dangerous assignment of her life, protecting the warriors who protected the nation. The helicopter ride from Bagram Air Base to Forward Operating Base Chapman was Maria's first real introduction to the reality of Afghanistan. The aircraft flew low through mountain valleys, following routes designed to avoid areas where enemy fighters were known to have surface-to-air missiles. Below them, the landscape was a harsh mixture of rocky peaks, narrow valleys, and villages that looked unchanged from centuries past. Chief Petty Officer Mike Hendricks, the man she was replacing at Chapman, sat across from her in the helicopter cabin. He was a 20-year Navy veteran who had spent the last 8 months at the forward operating base and was finally rotating home to his family in Virginia. "The base is different from anything you trained for," Hendricks shouted over the noise of the rotor blades. "It's smaller, more isolated, and the enemy knows exactly where we are. They've been probing our defenses for months, looking for weaknesses." He handed her a folder containing intelligence reports and tactical assessments that would not have been available during her stateside training. "The Taliban commander in this area is named Khalil Haqqani. He's smart, patient, and he's been planning something big for months. We know this because our special ops teams have been intercepting communications, but we don't know when or how he plans to attack." Maria studied the reports as the helicopter continued its journey through the mountains. Forward Operating Base Chapman housed approximately 200 personnel, including special operations teams, intelligence analysts, and support staff. The base's primary mission was to serve as a launching point for raids against high-value targets in the region, which made it a constant target for enemy retaliation. The helicopter began its descent toward a flat area surrounded by high mountain peaks. As they approached, Maria could see the base laid out below them. A collection of concrete buildings, sandbag fortifications, and guard towers surrounded by multiple layers of fencing and defensive barriers. It looked like a fortress built in the middle of nowhere, which was essentially what it was. "Welcome to Chapman," Hendricks said as the aircraft touched down. "You're home for the next 6 months." The base commander, Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Mitchell, met them at the landing zone. She was a career officer with combat experience in both Iraq and Afghanistan, and Maria immediately sensed that she was the kind of leader who led from the front rather than from behind a desk. "Santos, I've heard good things about you from Commander Sullivan," Mitchell said after the initial introductions. "Hendricks will spend the next week showing you the ropes, and then you'll be on your own. I hope you're ready for this." The orientation process was intensive and comprehensive. Maria learned the base layout, the communication procedures, the locations of all ammunition storage areas, and the protocols for coordinating with incoming special operations teams. She met the other security personnel who would be her teammates and learned that each of them had been hand-selected for their skills and reliability. Sergeant First Class David Park was a former Army Ranger who had volunteered for a second deployment to Afghanistan after being wounded during his first tour. Staff Sergeant Lisa Chun was an Air Force security specialist who had previously served at bases in Iraq and had a reputation for being able to spot threats that others missed. Corpsman First Class Tony Rodriguez was a Navy medic who had cross-trained in security procedures and served as both medical support and additional firepower. The key to surviving here, Park explained during her first week, is to never get comfortable. The enemy watches us constantly, learning our routines, looking for patterns they can exploit. We change guard schedules randomly, we vary patrol routes, and we never assume that quiet means safe. Maria's first real test came during her second week at Chapman. She was conducting a midnight perimeter patrol when her radio crackled with an urgent message from the Base Operations Center. All security personnel, this is Base Ops. We have intelligence indicating possible enemy movement in Sector 7. Maintain heightened alert status and report any unusual activity immediately. Sector 7 was the area of the perimeter that Maria was currently patrolling. She immediately took cover behind a concrete barrier and began scanning the area beyond the fence with her night vision equipment. For several minutes, she saw nothing unusual, just a normal landscape of rocks and sparse vegetation that surrounded the base. Then, she detected movement. It was subtle, just a slight shift in shadows about 200 meters from the fence line, but her training had taught her to notice details that didn't belong. She watched the area carefully and saw the movement again, definitely human, and definitely try to remain hidden. Maria keyed her radio and whispered her report. Base Ops, this is Santos in Sector 7. I have eyes on possible enemy personnel approximately 200 meters northeast of Checkpoint 7. Single individual, possibly conducting surveillance. The response was immediate. Santos, maintain visual contact, but do not engage unless directly threatened. We're sending additional personnel to your location. For the next 20 minutes, Maria tracked the individual as he moved slowly along the ridge line that overlooked the base. His movement patterns suggested he was conducting detailed reconnaissance, probably mapping defensive positions and looking for vulnerable points in the perimeter. When Sergeant Park and two other security personnel arrived at her position, they were able to confirm her sighting and coordinate a response that involved both base security and a special operations team that was standing by for such situations. The reconnaissance mission was disrupted without direct confrontation, but intelligence analysts later determined that it had been part of a larger enemy effort to gather information for a planned attack. Maria's alertness and proper procedures had potentially prevented the enemy from obtaining critical intelligence about the base's defenses. Outstanding work, Santos, Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell told her during the debrief. That kind of attention to detail is exactly why you were selected for this assignment. As her first month at Chapman progressed, Maria settled into the rhythm of life at a forward operating base. Days were filled with security patrols, weapons maintenance, intelligence briefings, and coordination with special operations teams that arrived and departed at all hours. Nights often involved standing watch in guard towers or manning communication equipment that linked the base to higher headquarters. The special operations teams that used Chapman as their base were unlike any military personnel Maria had previously encountered. They operated with a level of professionalism and efficiency that seemed almost supernatural. Teams would arrive in the middle of the night, conduct mission planning sessions that lasted hours, disappear into the mountains for days at a time, and return with high-value targets or critical intelligence. Most of the operators treated the base security personnel with professional respect, understanding that their mission success often depended on the quality of the protective services provided by guards like Maria. But there were occasional tensions, especially when operational security requirements conflicted with base security procedures. The tension came to a head during Maria's 6th week at Chapman, when a Navy SEAL team returned from a mission with a seriously wounded teammate who needed immediate medical evacuation. The team leader, a lieutenant commander named Harrison, demanded immediate access to the helicopter landing zone, which was currently occupied by a supply helicopter that was unloading ammunition. "Santos, I need that landing zone cleared now," Harrison said, his voice tight with urgency. "My teammate is bleeding out, and the medevac bird is 5 minutes away." Maria looked at the supply operation, which was only half completed and involved several pallets of sensitive ammunition that could not be left unsecured. According to base regulations, ammunition transfers had to be completed before the landing zone could be used for other purposes. "Sir, I understand the urgency, but I need to coordinate with the ammunition detail to secure their materials before." "There's no time for coordination," Harrison interrupted. "I'm ordering you to clear that landing zone immediately. My man is dying." Maria found herself in the same type of situation she had faced at the ammunition facility in San Diego, a senior officer demanding that she ignore established procedures due to an emergency situation. But this time, the stakes were even higher. A wounded American warrior was bleeding out while she had to make a decision about following regulations. She looked at the wounded SEAL, who was unconscious on a stretcher being carried by his teammates. Blood was seeping through multiple bandages, and his face was pale in a way that suggested severe blood loss. She looked at the ammunition detail, which would need at least 10 more minutes to complete their transfer and secure the materials. Maria made her decision based on the same principles that had guided her throughout her military career. The mission comes first, but safety and security cannot be completely abandoned. "Rodriguez, get down to the ammo detail and expedite their security procedures," she commanded over her radio. "Park, coordinate with the supply chopper to move clear of the LZ immediately. I'll take responsibility for the ammunition security." She turned to Lieutenant Commander Harrison. "Sir, the landing zone will be clear in 3 minutes. I'm ordering an emergency halt to the ammunition transfer, but I'll need your team to provide security for the unsecured materials until the medevac is complete." Harrison nodded quickly. "Done. My men will secure your ammo. Just get me that landing zone." The next few minutes were controlled chaos of coordinated activity. The supply helicopter moved clear of the landing area. The ammunition detail secured half their materials and established a defensive perimeter around the remainder, and the wounded SEAL was positioned for immediate evacuation. The medical evacuation helicopter arrived exactly when promised, and the wounded operator was loaded aboard and airborne within 2 minutes of touchdown. As the aircraft disappeared into the night sky, Harrison approached Maria with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Santos, that was outstanding work," he said. "You found a way to follow your procedures while still getting my man the help he needed. That kind of thinking saves lives." Later that night, as Maria completed her incident report, she realized that the event had been another test of her judgment and decision-making ability under pressure. But this time, the test had been administered by the very special operations personnel she was there to support, and she had proven that she could balance competing priorities without abandoning her responsibilities. Forward Operating Base Chapman was teaching her lessons that no training program could provide. She was learning to function in an environment where every decision could have life or death consequences, where following procedures blindly could be as dangerous as ignoring them completely, and where true professionalism meant finding ways to accomplish the mission while maintaining the highest standards of safety and security. With 4 more months remaining in her deployment, Maria Santos was beginning to understand why Commander Sullivan had personally recruited her for this assignment. This was not just guard duty. It was the crucible where warriors were forged. The attack came during Maria's 3rd month at Forward Operating Base Chapman, on a quiet Thursday morning that had started like any other. She was conducting her routine dawn patrol of the perimeter when the first rocket-propelled grenade exploded against the outer defensive wall, sending concrete fragments and shrapnel flying across the compound. The coordinated assault was everything that intelligence reports had predicted and worse. Khalil Haqqani had spent months planning the attack, positioning fighters on three sides of the base, and timing the assault to coincide with the arrival of a high-value target that his intelligence network had identified. Maria dove for cover as automatic weapons fire erupted from multiple positions in the surrounding mountains. The attack was more sophisticated than anything the base had faced before, with disciplined fire teams providing covering fire, while rocket teams moved to better positions to target critical infrastructure. All personnel, this is base ops, came the urgent voice over the radio. We are under attack from multiple positions. Implement defensive protocol Alpha immediately. This is not a drill. Maria's training took over as she moved to her assigned defensive position in Tower 3, which overlooked the main approach to the base's ammunition storage facility. As she climbed the stairs to the tower, explosions echoed across the compound, and she could hear the distinctive crack of incoming sniper fire. From her position in the tower, Maria had a clear view of the main attack route that enemy forces would need to use if they intended to reach the ammunition storage areas. Her job was to prevent that from happening, no matter what the cost. Through her rifle scope, she could see muzzle flashes from at least 6 different positions where enemy fighters were providing covering fire for teams that were attempting to breach the outer perimeter. The attackers were wearing military-style equipment and moving with the discipline of trained soldiers rather than the irregular tactics usually associated with Taliban fighters. Tower 3, this is base ops, her radio crackled. We have intelligence indicating the enemy's primary objective is the ammunition storage facility. You're the last line of defense for that sector. Engage any hostile forces that breach the perimeter fence. Maria settled into her shooting position and began to systematically engage the enemy fighters she could identify. Her marksmanship training, both from her regular Navy service and the intensive preparation for this assignment, served her well as she placed accurate fire on targets that were attempting to advance toward the base. The battle continued for over 2 hours, with enemy forces making multiple attempts to breach the perimeter while base defenders coordinated their response with air support that was being called in from other locations. Maria expended over 300 rounds of ammunition, engaging targets at ranges from 100 to over 400 meters. During the most intense phase of the attack, a team of enemy fighters managed to breach the outer fence and began advancing toward the ammunition storage areas. Maria found herself in the position of being the only defender with a clear field of fire to stop them before they could reach their objective. She engaged the lead fighter at a range of 200 meters, dropping him with a single shot to center mass. The second fighter took cover behind a concrete barrier and began returning fire, forcing Maria to duck below the parapet of her tower as bullets struck the concrete around her position. When she rose to engage again, she found that the remaining fighters had split up and were approaching the ammunition storage from 2 different directions. She would have to choose which group to engage while hoping that other defenders could handle the second group. Maria made her choice based on which group was closer to actually reaching the ammunition storage facility. She engaged the 3-man team on the left, dropping 2 of them before the third fighter reached the cover of a maintenance building that was only 50 meters from the ammunition bunkers. Base ops, this is Santos in Tower 3, she reported over the radio while maintaining her watch for the hidden fighter. I have 1 enemy fighter in the maintenance building adjacent to Bunker 4. He's approximately 50 meters from the ammunition storage, and I don't have a clear shot. The response was immediate. Santos, maintain overwatch. We're sending a reaction team to your location. But Maria realized that the reaction team would take several minutes to reach the maintenance building, and several minutes was more time than they could afford to give an enemy fighter who was that close to the base's most dangerous materials. She made a decision that went against every protocol in the book for tower guards. She left her assigned position and moved to ground level, where she could maneuver to get a clear shot at the fighter hiding in the maintenance building. Moving carefully along the fence line, Maria used her knowledge of the base layout to approach the maintenance building from an angle that the enemy fighter would not expect. She could hear him moving inside the building, apparently looking for a way to reach the ammunition storage without exposing himself to fire from the tower positions. Maria positioned herself at the corner of the building and waited. Her patience was rewarded when the fighter appeared in the doorway, carrying what looked like an explosive device that he intended to use against the ammunition bunkers. She engaged him at point-blank range, ending the immediate threat to the ammunition storage facility. As she secured the area and checked to ensure the fighter was no longer a threat, she discovered that he had been carrying enough explosives to cause a catastrophic secondary explosion if he had reached his target. The attack was finally repelled when Apache attack helicopters arrived and systematically eliminated the remaining enemy positions in the surrounding mountains. When the shooting stopped, Forward Operating Base Chapman had successfully defended itself against the most serious attack in its operational history. During the after-action review, Maria learned that her decision to leave her assigned position to pursue the fighter who had reached the maintenance building had been the crucial action that prevented the enemy from achieving their primary objective. "Santos, what you did was technically against standing orders," Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell said during the debrief. "Tower guards are not supposed to abandon their positions under any circumstances. But if you hadn't made that decision, we would have lost our ammunition storage and probably half the base." Commander Sullivan arrived at Chapman 3 days after the attack to conduct his own assessment of the battle and the performance of base personnel. When he met with Maria, his first words were not what she expected. "I hear you've been making a habit of ignoring orders when you think the situation requires it," he said with a slight smile. "First with the terrorists in San Diego, now with leaving your tower position during the attack. Are you starting to see a pattern?" Maria considered the question seriously. "Sir, I think the pattern is that sometimes following orders exactly as written can prevent you from accomplishing the mission those orders were designed to support." Sullivan nodded approvingly. "That's exactly right, Santos. Rules and procedures are important, but judgment is more important. The ability to understand the intent behind orders and adapt them to unexpected circumstances. That's what separates good soldiers from great warriors." He paused, studying her face. "How would you feel about extending your deployment here for another 6 months? Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell has requested that you be assigned as the Senior Security Specialist for Chapman. It would mean a promotion to Petty Officer First Class and leadership responsibility for the entire base defense team." Maria thought about the offer. 6 more months in Afghanistan would mean missing her brother's wedding and delaying her plans to start college when she returned to the United States. It would also mean 6 more months of living with the constant possibility of attacks like the one they had just survived. But it would also mean continuing to serve alongside the most elite warriors in the American military, continuing to test herself against challenges that most people would never face, and continuing to prove that a young woman from Phoenix could stand shoulder to shoulder with the best the military had to offer. "Yes, sir," she said without hesitation. "I accept the promotion and the extended deployment." Commander Sullivan extended his hand. "Outstanding. Welcome to the elite level of military service, Petty Officer First Class Santos. You've earned your place here through performance under fire." As Maria shook his hand, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. It had started with a routine guard duty assignment at an ammunition facility in San Diego, where her attention to detail and adherence to procedures had prevented a terrorist attack. That had led to personal recruitment by a SEAL commander and intensive training that had prepared her for assignment to one of the most dangerous forward operating bases in Afghanistan. Now she was being promoted and given leadership responsibility for protecting the warriors who were conducting the most critical missions in the war on terrorism. She had proven herself not just as a guard who followed orders, but as a warrior who could make life and death decisions under extreme pressure. The girl from Phoenix who had joined the Navy 6 years ago to see the world and serve her country had become something she had never imagined possible. A battle-tested veteran who had earned the respect of Navy SEALs and other special operations personnel through courage and competence under fire. As she walked back to her quarters to write letters to her family about her promotion and extended deployment, Maria Santos knew that she had found her calling. This was where she belonged, serving alongside America's elite warriors in the most challenging and dangerous assignments the military had to offer. The guard duty assignment that had started as routine had become the foundation for a military career that would take her to the highest levels of special operations support. And it had all begun because she had been willing to challenge authority when something didn't feel right, and to trust her instincts even when powerful people tried to intimidate her into backing down. 3 years later, when she finally returned to the United States, Petty Officer First Class Maria Santos will be one of the most decorated female veterans of the Afghanistan conflict. But that recognition was still in the future. For now, she was simply a warrior who had found her place in the elite ranks of America's military, protecting those who protected the nation.